When I finished writing my implementation of AStar last year, I thought I was pretty much done with the hunter-killer enemy type I wanted to include in my game. I had a tank that could navigate its way to any tile on the map that I clicked on. So all I had to do was hook it up to the player's location, and then I'd have a tank that relentlessly follows the player around trying to kill it, right? Well, it turned out there's a lot more code that had to be written to make this behavior work. In this devlog, I'll share all the additional scenarios and problems I had to handle and how I went about doing so. If you're new to this channel, I've been working on my first game, which is a top-down 2D shooter where you control a tank and your goal is to defend your command post from the enemy tanks. But aside from the command post being destroyed, another way for you to lose is to run out of lives. So to help facilitate this, I wanted an enemy type that rather than going for the command post, went for the player. This enemy I'm calling the hunter-killer enemy. The first thing I had to do was add a way for the hunter-killers to know where on the map the player is. For this, I created a new class called breadcrumbs. When the level starts, the map creates a single instance of this class. This maintains a pointer to the current player tank, and that player tank in turn maintains a current tile vector too. Every physics process, the player tank compares its current tile with what it has stored and updates it if it's different. When the hunter-killer tank enters a level, it queries its pointer to the breadcrumbs class for the location of the player. Having the hunter-killer query a separate object rather than the player itself is useful when the player is killed and is in the middle of respawning. In this case, the breadcrumbs will just respond with the previous player's information until it gets a pointer to the new instance of the player. But knowing the location of its target is only the beginning. My implementation of AStar requires a goal tile, and it can't be the current tile of the player because the player is sitting on that tile. By the way, if you want an entire video of how I wrote AStar from scratch in GDScript, I will link that in the description below. To make it extra sneaky, I also wanted the hunter-killer to try to position itself behind the player so the player gets shot in the back. To accomplish this, the breadcrumbs class also has a getGoal function that the hunter-killer can use. The getGoal function figures out which direction the player is facing and calculates the appropriate offset from the player's current tile to position itself for a backstab. To ensure there's enough space, I set the offset to be 2 tiles behind the player. But what if the goal behind the player is blocked by a tree, another tank, or is out of bounds of the map? In this case, I added logic so the breadcrumbs calculates secondary optional offsets: driver side left, passenger side right, and directly in front of the player tank. The hunter-killer will then navigate to one of these other offsets if the primary behind offset is not available. Okay, but what if all the goals are blocked? In this case, the logic that I wrote is, given the player tank's tile, find the closest open tile using breadth-first search. This becomes the adjusted goal tile. It's important to use breadth-first search rather than depth-first search so that the found tile is closest to the tank rather than the first open tile in the initial direction of the search. For example, in this situation where the command post blocks the rear of the player, depth-first search would start searching in this direction and then find this tile, whereas breadth-first search would find this tile, which is a better tile than this one. The next situation that I had to handle was that given a goal, like this goal, what if there's no path to that goal because the trees are blocking it? So the solution is to again use breadth-first search and find the closest open tile that has a path, this one. Then a more extreme problem. What if there's no adjustable goal at all? Every tile is blocked. In this case, I added code for the hunter-killer to go idle, facing the direction of the player. Given that the hunter-killer can also shoot down trees in the actual game, this strategy could eventually lead to a path being created. Next, I had to code the behavior when it actually reaches the goal. This one's easy. Just face the player's tile and continue shooting. Another case that I ran into while playtesting was, What if while the hunter-killer was on its way to the goal behind the player, it bumps into the player? In this case, go idle facing the player and continue shooting. Without adding code to handle this special case, it would have just kept ramming the player non-stop. Finally, the easiest one. What if the player is gone because he's out of lives and the game is over? In this case, just stop without glitching out. Your work is done, hunter-killer. So with all of those cases handled, I now have behavior that I'm happy with. Multiples of them can work like a team surrounding the player. It can also handle situations where it's locked in and there's no path to get to you. But most important is that it chases you relentlessly, and if you let your guard down, it'll kill you and then go after your respawned self without skipping a beat. To sum up, here's a checklist of all the questions or cases I had to address for my game. If you're in the middle of implementing your own tile-based navigation / pathfinding AI, you might find it useful to run through this checklist too. I added a link in the description to my website where you can easily copy and paste this if you like. Alright, that's it for this devlog. The next step on my list is to create a Steam page for my game. Since this is my first game, this is something I've never done, so I might create a devlog on that depending on how much I'm allowed to share. I also worked a ton on other updates over the holiday break that I should share. But anyway, if you like this type of content, you can subscribe. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.